The Boston sky was gray on that cold February Tuesday. The wind swept through the narrow city streets, stirring dry leaves and the unfinished dreams of thousands. Among them was John Matthews, 38 years old, a construction worker with calloused hands and tired eyes that hid more than he liked to admit. John woke up every day before the sun rose. He lived in a small one-bedroom apartment on the south side of the city, where the heater made more noise than heat. He had been on his own since losing his parents at a young age. Life had never given him luxury or much hope, but even so, he never stopped dreaming, even if only in silence. He worked long, exhausting shifts as a construction helper, often under harsh conditions. His paycheck barely covered the bills, and groceries were managed like a military operation. Still, John never complained. His co-workers saw him as a good man, quiet, kind, always willing to help others, even when he could barely help himself. In another part of the city, slightly greener but still modest, lived Mary Collins, 35, an elementary school teacher. Her light brown hair framed her face gently, and her green eyes, though often tired, still carried the glow of someone who believed she could make a difference. She taught in a public school that struggled with overcrowded classrooms and a lack of resources. Mary lived a busy life, balancing lesson plans, grading papers, and caring for her elderly grandmother, who lived with her. Time for herself was rare. Her last serious relationship had ended 3 years earlier, when her fiancé left, claiming the life they shared was too small for his big dreams. Since then, Mary had closed herself off a little. Still, she never stopped believing in love, even if it felt distant, almost like a fantasy. That week, the city buzzed with talk of the record-breaking national lottery, a staggering $180 million jackpot. Lottery lines stretched around corners, and even people who never gambled were trying their luck. John was one of them. During his lunch break, after finishing his usual bologna sandwich and black coffee, he spotted a small kiosk downtown with a line of eager faces. Something nudged him forward. Maybe exhaustion, maybe the hope of changing everything. He dug into the pocket of his work overalls, pulled out a few crumpled bills, and bought a ticket. Why not? He muttered with a crooked smile as he calmly picked his numbers, like someone sketching out his own fate. That same afternoon, Mary was walking back from the pharmacy, her grandmother's medicine in hand. She passed the corner lottery shop and paused. She rarely ever played, but in that moment, she thought of unpaid bills, postponed dreams, and the trip she had always wanted to take. Hawaii, her dream destination since she was a teenager. She stepped inside. She chose her numbers based on meaningful dates: her mother's birthday, her father's passing, her graduation day, and the classroom number where she taught today. That night, both John and Mary watched the lottery drawing from their homes alone. John nearly spilled his cheap beer when he realized his numbers were being called out. One by one, he stopped breathing on the last digit. It was him. It was real. He grabbed the ticket, checked it 3 times, then screamed. And then he cried. For the first time in years, he truly cried. Mary dropped onto the couch, the remote slipping from her hands. Her heart pounded as if something far bigger than luck had just begun. Through tears, she smiled, thinking about the freedom this could bring. What neither of them knew was that, for the first time in national lottery history, 2 tickets with the exact same winning numbers had been sold. Coincidentally, they had picked the same numbers without ever knowing each other, living separate lives in different neighborhoods of the same city. The next day, the TV news confirmed the prize would be split. John just shrugged. It was still a mind-blowing amount, $90 million each. Enough to change everything. Enough to start over. A week later, at the Central Lottery office, John and Mary were among the few called in to claim the physical tickets in person. Both were nervous, dressed modestly, John in a barely worn button-down shirt, and Mary in a blue dress she saved for special occasions. In the waiting room, their eyes met. It was brief but intense, as if the air around them shimmered for just a moment. They didn't speak, just a shy, fleeting smile. Then each was called into a different room. The money was transferred. The press tried to reach out, but both declined interviews. Neither wanted fame, only peace. In the days that followed, quietly, without knowing about the other, they each made a similar decision. It was time to rest, time to celebrate, time to feel alive again. And so, separately, John and Mary booked trips to the same dream destination, Hawaii. Each of them chose the same luxury resort in Maui, private bungalows, ocean views, spa days, exotic cuisine, and the promise of blue skies and warm waves. And just like that, two strangers, bound by coincidence and a string of lucky numbers, set out on a journey that fate, smiling behind the scenes, had been writing all along. The plane touched down gently on the runway at Kahului Airport, in the heart of Maui. Warm tropical air embraced the fuselage, filled with the sweet scent of hibiscus flowers and ocean breeze. It was early spring in Hawaii, and the island felt alive, pulsing as if inviting each visitor to leave the real world behind. John stepped off the plane wearing dark sunglasses that masked his weary eyes, but something in him had changed. His freshly trimmed beard, crisp white linen shirt, and relaxed shoes revealed a man in transition. No longer just the construction worker with heavy boots and calloused hands, he was someone trying to recognize himself outside the weight of routine. He hailed a cab to the resort, a paradise wrapped in palm trees and soft, white sand beaches. At check-in, the concierge greeted him with a fragrant flower lei and a wide, welcoming smile. "Welcome to the Mahina Sunrise Resort, Mr. Matthews. Your suite is ready, ocean view, just as requested." John nodded, slightly awkward. In the face of such warmth, everything still felt like a dream. In the elevator, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. He wasn't sure what he wanted from this trip, only that he needed to be here, to either find himself or lose himself a little. Elsewhere in the airport, Mary was also arriving. She wore a light floral dress and simple sandals. Her hair was pulled into a relaxed bun, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of fatigue and awe. She rolled a medium suitcase behind her, enough for the carefully planned two-week escape. This was her first time traveling alone. Of course, she was nervous, but she also felt a thrilling shiver of freedom. She wasn't just a tired schoolteacher with bills to pay anymore. She was a woman who had beaten the odds, who could breathe, who could dream again. Ironically, the same cab that had dropped John off minutes earlier now came to pick up Mary. The driver was cheerful and talkative, chatting about the best sunset spots, hidden hiking trails, and a local legend known as the Hawaiian Love Lottery, a romantic tale about two lonely travelers who meet on the shores of Wailea and change each other's lives forever. Mary chuckled softly. "I'd bet on that lottery," she said, unaware of how prophetic her words truly were. Upon arriving at the resort, she was greeted with the same kindness. Her suite, coincidentally, was on the same hallway as John's, just 2 doors away. But for now, fate continued to play with timing. In the days that followed, John and Mary soaked in the island in their own ways. John spent his mornings walking along the beach, his bare feet tracing the edge of the tide, listening to the waves break with a rhythm that felt like a song written to heal. He carried a notebook, and from time to time, he scribbled ideas, thoughts, or flashes of childhood memories. For the first time, he was writing and he liked it. Mary woke early to watch the sunrise. Then she'd attend yoga classes at the resort, where each stretch seemed to release the weight of years from her shoulders. In the afternoons, she'd read romance novels by the pool and sometimes wrote postcards she'd never send. At night, she dined alone but smiled at the waiters, slowly getting used to the sound of her own company. Then came the moment of chance. It was a clear skied Thursday. After breakfast, John decided to sign up for a diving class offered by the resort. He thought it might be fun or at least different. At the meeting point on the beach, he found a small group already waiting. Among them, a woman in a blue dress with green eyes. Mary. She had signed up at the last minute too. She just wanted to try something new, to feel her heartbeat with excitement again. Their eyes met, a flicker of recognition. They both hesitated, then smiled a light, shy smile, like the kind you give a neighbor you've seen around but never spoken to. "I think I saw you at the lottery office, right?" John asked, his voice calm and kind. Mary laughed, surprised. "You were there too? I remember you." That cramped little room, all the tension, and the silence, John added. "I've never seen so many people so quiet. About so much money." They both laughed, and the barrier between them dissolved. During the diving class, they ended up side by side. The instructor guided the group patiently, and the two helped each other with the gear. Their laughter came easily. The interaction was natural, effortless, as if they'd known each other long before this moment. After class, they walked along the beach together. "So, what do you do with $90 million in your pocket?" Mary teased, grinning. "For now," John replied, gazing out over the ocean. "I walk, I breathe, and I try to figure out who I want to be when I grow up." "Good answer," she said, nodding. "I'm still deciding whether I want to become a writer, a photographer, or just a full-time tourist." "Why not all three?" he offered. They sat on the sand, watching the horizon. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was peaceful, like nothing needed explaining. "You know what's funny?" Mary said. "I came here thinking I had to get far away from everything to find myself. And now, I'm sitting next to someone who was there the whole time. Same place, same moment. Maybe fate just took the scenic route before introducing us properly." John replied, looking at her with quiet sincerity. That evening, having dinner together felt like the most natural thing in the world. The resort's restaurant, bathed in soft lighting and live acoustic music, became the backdrop of their first meal as two strangers who, unknowingly, were far more connected than they realized. And when they toasted not with champagne, but with fresh coconut water, it felt like something ancient, almost mythical, was unfolding. The luck hadn't ended with the winning ticket. It was only just beginning. The sun rose gently over the horizon, spilling golden hues across the soft waves of Walia. The first light of morning bathed the veranda of Mary's bungalow, where she sat with a cup of hibiscus tea in her hands and a heart still warm from the night before. She and John had shared dinner, talked for hours, and said goodbye with a quiet embrace, one of those hugs that speaks far more than words ever could. Since arriving in Hawaii, Mary hadn't felt this light. It was as if the weight she had carried in her chest for so long had begun to dissolve. Just across the hallway, John was waking up too earlier than usual. Something in his breath felt different, as if the anxiety that had followed him for years had finally gone on vacation. He felt calm, inspired. He opened his notebook and scribbled a phrase. Life is like the ocean, sometimes it comes with storms, but it always brings something back to shore. It felt strange to realize how much space that kind woman with the kind eyes and sincere smile now occupied in his thoughts. He wasn't in love, not yet, but there was something real there, a spark, and it was quietly growing. Later that day, they had planned a small group excursion to a hidden waterfall deep within the island. The trail took them through ferns as tall as people and trees with twisted roots, with nature singing all around. As they walked, their hands brushed accidentally, but neither of them pulled away. "Have you always lived in Boston?" Mary asked, breaking the silence as they paused by a stream. "Since I was a kid," John replied. "I lived with my parents until I was 14. Then, I figured things out on my own. They died in a car crash." He took a breath, his tone steady. "Since then, I've done a bit of everything. Cleaning jobs, construction, deliveries. I never had much, but I learned how to survive." Mary looked at him gently, not with pity, but with genuine admiration. There was strength in someone who hadn't let life harden him. "And you? Did you always want to be a teacher?" She smiled, watching the water flow between the rocks. "Since I was a little girl. My mom was a teacher too. She always said education was the most beautiful way to change the world. She died when I was 17. I've taken care of my grandmother ever since, and taught at schools that had everything missing except for kids who wanted to learn." "You're strong," John said quietly, but with conviction. She looked at him, and for a moment, something shifted. No one had said that to her in a long time. It sank in deeper than she expected. On the way back, they talked more, laughing, sharing funny childhood memories. John admitted he had never left the state before winning the lottery. Mary revealed she'd always dreamed of writing a children's book, but never had the time or the courage. "Maybe now's the right time," he said. "Maybe. And you? What do you want to do with your time?" John was silent for a few seconds. "I want to really live, feel the sun, sleep without exhaustion, and if I'm lucky, share all that with someone who sees the world with their heart. Like you." Mary looked away, a bit shy, but a soft smile touched her lips. That night, dinner felt even more intimate. They sat on the restaurant's veranda overlooking the ocean. The breeze was warm, and the table's candles wrapped them in gentle light. "You know," Mary said, stirring her pineapple juice with a straw, "I never thought winning the lottery would bring me a conversation like this." "Me neither," John replied, "but maybe the real luck wasn't the money. Maybe it was you." She laughed, though emotion sparkled in her eyes. "That was kind of cheesy." "A little," he admitted, laughing too. "But true." Silence. "But the good kind, the kind that doesn't ask anything. The kind that simply lets you breathe." "Wanna walk on the beach with me after this?" she asked softly. "Always." The ocean was already dark, but the full moon lit the sand with a silver glow. They walked side by side, unhurried. At one point, Mary stopped. "Do you ever feel like everything's falling into place, but you're still scared to trust it?" "I do, because we've spent so long expecting the worst." She nodded, and their eyes met again. "But what if this time it's different?" John took her hand firmly, but gently. "Then let's find out, one day at a time." And in that moment, with bare feet in the warm sand, the sea whispering behind them, and hearts slowly opening, they kissed for the first time. A kiss without haste, without promises, but full of possibilities. It was as if the tides had finally brought them what they had both been searching for. all along a place to anchor. Mornings in Maui remained radiant. The sun kissed the sea like an old friend, and the air carried the scent of blooming flowers that grew wild across the island. But inside Mary's heart, a small cloud had begun to form. She and John were growing closer by the day. It felt natural, almost inevitable. They spent their days together, hiking, diving, lazy afternoons reading by the pool, and long dinners under the stars. Liking him was easy. Smiling next to him was easy. Imagining a we was easy, and yet terrifying. During the third week of the trip, Mary woke earlier than usual. She stood on her bungalow's balcony, looking out over the ocean, and felt a familiar weight in her chest. That old feeling she knew too well. Fear of falling too hard. Fear of losing control. Fear that everything might collapse once they returned to reality. She picked up her journal and wrote, "Is it possible to love someone you've just met? Or is it just the scenery making everything look more beautiful?" That morning, she kept her distance from John gently. She told him she needed some time alone, to reflect and walk by herself. He respected that, but a subtle ache twisted in his stomach. Something had shifted, or maybe it had just come to the surface. While Mary walked the quiet beach, John went to a local cafe in the nearby village. He ordered a strong espresso and sat with his notebook in his lap. He needed to write, to organize the storm inside his head. She makes me forget my exhaustion, makes me feel like I'm more than my past. But am I enough? Does she see the same future I do? Since that kiss on the sand, a deep connection had formed between them, but neither had talked openly about what would come next. What would happen when they left Hawaii? When real life with its bills, responsibilities, and unanswered questions came knocking? John knew he carried deep scars. He had no college degree, no formal stability. The money freed him from poverty, but it didn't erase the history. And Mary was everything he had never dared to dream of. That afternoon, they had planned a catamaran sunset cruise. The sea was calm, and the boat glided smoothly over turquoise waters. Tourists surrounded them, but the two seemed wrapped in their own private world. Mary stared at the horizon, quiet. "Are you okay?" John asked gently, breaking the silence. She took a deep breath. I'm scared." Scared of what? Of being wrong. Of losing myself again. Of imagining something that might not exist once we leave this place. John nodded slowly. He understood every word. "I'm scared too. Scared that this is all just a dream. That I'll go home and still be the invisible man I was before." Mary met his eyes. There was pain there, but also courage. "You're not invisible, John, and you're not ordinary. But love doesn't survive on beautiful scenery alone." He took her hand. "Then let's be honest. No promises, just truth, okay?" she said softly. "So tell me, what do you really want?" John paused, letting the question settle. "I want to build something. Not a house, not a fortune. A life where I feel whole. And I want, if it's possible, for that life to have you in it. Not just as a memory of Hawaii, but as my reality." Mary smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "I want that too. But I don't want to fall in love with a fantasy. I want to know the real you, with all your doubts, your baggage, and your silences. Then I'll tell you everything," he promised, "if you'll do the same." And there, in the middle of the ocean, with the sunset casting liquid gold across the waves, they began to open up. They spoke of failures, of fears, of lonely nights spent wondering if they'd ever be truly loved. John talked about his brother, how addiction had torn their bond. He spoke of the shame of not finishing high school, and the quiet fear that wealth would only push the right people away. Mary revealed the guilt she still carried for not being more present in her grandmother's final months. She told him how her ex-fiancé made her doubt her worth and whether she could be loved just as she was. As the boat docked at nightfall, they returned to the resort in silence, but this time, it was a shared silence, the kind of silence that knows a bridge has been crossed, even if the other side is still hidden by mist. Later, sitting on the sand, they listened to the gentle rhythm of waves. Do you think it's possible to start over with someone, even after you've lived so much on your own? Mary asked. I do, John replied, because starting over doesn't mean erasing. It means using everything we've lived to love better, with more care, with more truth. She rested her head on his shoulder. Then let's try. No rush, no masks, just us. Outside the postcard? He squeezed her hand softly. Outside the postcard. I'm in. That night, there were no grand declarations, no sweeping promises. Just two tired hearts deciding, together, to believe once more. Because sometimes love begins like that between lights and silences. And it's in the space between one wound and another that love finally finds a home. The plane cut through the clouds above the Pacific, leaving behind the palm trees of Maui, the crystal-clear waters, and the quiet smiles that had marked the last few days. John gazed out the window, his thoughts drifting like the clouds outside. Next to him, Mary slept with her head resting on his shoulder, her fingers intertwined with his as if to say, I'm here. Paradise was over, but love wasn't. Now the hardest part was about to begin real life. Back in Boston, each returned to their own home. They didn't part out of fear, but by choice, wanting to take it slow, keep their feet on the ground. But in less than a month, they were already planning a move. They decided to rent a house together, not a mansion, but a simple home with a garden and space to start over. The money was there, of course, but it was never the focus. The focus was each other. John began studying. He enrolled in a GED program and later a carpentry technical course, an old dream he'd kept since childhood. He started making wooden furniture in his garage, each piece carrying a story, a memory, a piece of himself. Mary, meanwhile, took a sabbatical from teaching. She used part of the winnings to publish her first children's book, inspired by her students, her grandmother, and herself. The book, illustrated with delicate watercolors, was called When the Sun Met the Rain, dedicated to John, the one who taught me to bloom again. But something even bigger was growing inside them, a desire to make their incredible luck, that improbable ticket, mean something real in the world, something meaningful. One Saturday afternoon, walking through the old neighborhood where Mary grew up, everything began to reveal itself. They passed an orphanage made of worn bricks and old windows. Children ran in the yard, playing with patched-up balls and worn toys. Mary stopped. I know this place. My mom used to volunteer here when she was young. She always said, these kids see the world with more truth than a lot of grown-ups. John looked quietly, feeling something stir deep in his chest. Shall we go in? They were greeted with surprise by the orphanage coordinator, a kind woman with white hair named Mrs. Ruth. They talked for hours. They heard stories of children who had been abandoned and forgotten, but still dreamed of becoming doctors, teachers, dancers. They left transformed. I don't just want to give money, John said that night. I want to be involved. I want to get my hands dirty. And I want to teach again, Read to them, tell stories, show them they can be anything they want. That's how the Roots of Tomorrow project was born, an initiative funded by John and Mary to renovate the orphanage, provide quality education, psychological support, and workshops in art, music, and sports. They didn't just give money, they gave heart. They spent the following months devoted to the project, organized events, hired professionals, and most importantly, built bonds with the children. Gradually, the place gained new colors, new sounds, and new hope. It was there, in the orphanage's new library on reopening day, that John knelt down among the children and held Mary's hand with a simple silver ring he had made himself. I can't promise you a life without fear, without past, without storms, but I promise to be by your side through all of them. Will you marry me? The children erupted in cheers, claps, and hugs. Mary laughed and cried at the same time. Of course I will, she replied, pulling him into a tight embrace. The wedding took place 3 months later, in the orphanage's garden. The flowers were picked by the children. The music was played by a local band. The dress was borrowed, but the love there was abundant, immense, unforgettable. At the ceremony, instead of gifts, they asked for donations toward scholarships for the children. And there, in front of the emotional eyes of friends, teachers, and dozens of hopeful little hearts, Mary and John said yes. Yes to improbable love. Yes to new beginnings. Yes to a life with purpose. After the celebration, they returned home barefoot, their clothes wrinkled, and their hearts full. They sat on the porch, sharing cheap wine beneath the stars above. It still feels like a dream sometimes, Mary said. Maybe it is. John smiled. But it's ours. And this time, I don't want to wake up. She rested her head on his chest. Thank you for not turning away that day at the lottery. He laughed softly. Fate just gave us a little push. The rest was us choosing. And there, under the sky of the city that now felt lighter, more alive, they understood that it wasn't about numbers or luck. It was about love. About believing that even the most broken lives can bloom when you have someone by your side and a greater purpose in your heart. And so, John and Mary lived not a fairy tale, but a real story, made of courage, rebuilding, and a love born from the improbable that became eternal.